Keir Starmer just experienced a political nightmare at Prime Minister's questions, and it was truly brutal. Before a packed chamber, he faced intense criticism over harsh decisions that have pushed many people into hardship. Can he recover from this very public crisis, or is this the beginning of an irreversible downfall for his political career? Stay tuned as we dive into this shocking story.
Number one, Mr. Speaker.
Prime Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This weekend we remembered the late Queen and her enduring legacy of service and devotion to our country.
At the Labour Party conference, a vote was held to decide on ending winter fuel payment support for certain retirees. Sharon Graham, the UK General Secretary, voiced her strong opposition to the issue on the final morning of the conference held in Liverpool. Keir Starmer's policy to cut winter fuel subsidies has ignited a fierce backlash, especially among pensioners who rely on this essential support to keep warm through the harsh winter. For years, this subsidy has been a lifeline, helping the elderly cope with the cold and manage heating costs, which continue to soar as temperatures drop. For many retirees living on a limited fixed income, this aid marks the line between staying comfortably warm and enduring the unforgiving chill. The importance of winter fuel payments is hard to overstate, especially as energy prices continue to climb. Pensioners, already a financially pressured group, are among the hardest hit by the rising cost of living. Depriving them of the means to meet basic needs like heating is not only a political issue, but a deeply humanitarian one.
The whole conference was overshadowed in the few days before it by rows about donations, namely the Prime Minister and senior members of his cabinet revealing that they hadn't broken any rules, but they had taken donations to buy clothes, to buy glasses.
MP Pete Wishart confronted Keir Starmer head-on at Prime Minister's questions, PMQ, sharply criticising his decision to cut fuel allowances for the elderly. Wishart didn't hold back, pointing out that Starmer was ignoring those who had dedicated their lives to society and were now in greatest need of support. He described it not just as a policy mistake, but as an act of betrayal. Wishart emphasised that given rising inflation and the cost of living, cutting winter fuel payments was akin to kicking the elderly when they are down. His attack was uncompromising, portraying Starmer as a politician out of touch with reality and indifferent to the struggles of older people. The public, particularly pensioners and working-class communities, reacted with fury. Many saw this as proof that Starmer was completely detached from the real difficulties faced by vulnerable groups. During the harsh winter in the UK, when energy prices were at record highs, the elderly were being forced to choose between heating and eating. For retirees who have spent their lives contributing to the system, this felt like a betrayal of society's promise to support them. On social media and in the press, criticism of Starmer flooded in, accusing him of caring more about political posturing than standing up for the vulnerable. In a highly charged PMQ session, Starmer made an unforgivable mistake when he was faced with sharp criticisms from Wishart about the fuel cutbacks. Rather than responding with empathy or a meaningful explanation, Starmer replied with an inappropriate joke. He scoffed and downplayed the struggles of pensioners who were left shivering in their own homes. His response not only lacked sensitivity, but also showed a profound disrespect, leaving people stunned. This wasn't just a miscalculation, it was a moment that exposed Starmer's disconnection from the very people he is meant to represent. As a leader, particularly as the leader of the opposition, some situations demand seriousness, and this was one of those moments. Elderly people are facing a real crisis, trying to stay warm in the midst of a brutal winter, and the last thing they need from their leader is a smug laugh. Starmer's response not only disappointed, but also revealed an air of disdain. This attitude quickly sparked a wave of criticism from the media for his lack of empathy and sensitivity. The public's reaction was immediate and sharp. Pensioners, already feeling abandoned by the cuts to their benefits, were now even angrier after seeing Starmer belittle their struggles. For many, this wasn't just a poor joke, but a symbol of the growing distance between Starmer and the people he should be representing. They had hoped for answers, for a sign of concern, but instead, they were confronted with a leader more interested in avoiding the issue than addressing their needs.
That's exactly what it is. I think the anti-Israel psychosis that is gripping a lot of institutions in the West is really an extension of their anti-Westernism and even their anti-civilization, their turn against civilization itself.
Pete Wishart's second major criticism of Keir Starmer during Prime Minister's Questions, PMQ, focused on his failure to address the worsening crisis of child poverty in the UK, particularly in Scotland. For many, Starmer's lack of action isn't just a political issue, it is a serious moral failure. Child poverty is a pressing social issue directly affecting the most vulnerable, and the situation has become increasingly alarming under Starmer's leadership. The stark reality is that over 3.9 million children in the UK are living in poverty, including 87,000 children in Scotland. These families are struggling every day to afford enough food, pay for rent, and ensure their children have a warm and safe place to live.
I prosecuted the Director of Public Prosecution, serious terrorists, for 5 years, working with the intelligence and security forces and with the police in Northern Ireland. Asked the Prime Minister to have the decency to withdraw that comment.
I think, in fairness, I'm sure you would like to withdraw.
Well, Mr. Speaker, I'm very happy.
Wishart quickly pointed out that Starmer's indecisiveness has only worsened the crisis. One of the most controversial policies is the cap on benefits for families with more than 2 children, a measure introduced under the Conservative government. This policy limits financial support for larger families, leaving them in a precarious and vulnerable position. Starmer's firm stance in maintaining this cap, despite growing pressure from within his own Labour Party, has caused many working-class people to turn away from him. Many families who once saw the Labour Party as their ally against the austerity policies of the Conservative Party now feel betrayed by Starmer's indifference and hesitation.
To make sure that we minimise the impact of coronavirus on the poorest kids in this country. And one of the best ways in which we could do that, by the way, Mr. Speaker, would be to encourage all kids who can go back to school to go back to school now because their schools are safe.
One of Pete Wishart's harshest criticisms in his attack on Keir Starmer was the accusation that the austerity measures under Starmer are even more brutal than those previously enforced by the Conservative Party. For anyone familiar with UK politics, this is indeed an unforgiving indictment. The Conservative government has long been notorious for policies that exacerbate poverty and harm the most vulnerable. The fact that Starmer's Labour Party is now implementing cuts that are even more ruthless is not only a critique of policy, but a comprehensive condemnation of his leadership and values.
2-child benefit cap, as introduced by the Conservative Party, has left 250,000 children living in poverty. So can I ask the Prime Minister, does he take comfort?
Keir Starmer's economic policies, particularly his decision to continue austerity measures, have sparked a fierce backlash. The Labour Party, historically the party of the working class, is now accused of being the very factor deepening the struggles it once promised to fight against. Pete Wishart's comments highlight how Starmer's economic approach has created a wave of disillusionment, not only within the Labour Party itself, but also among voters who have placed their trust in the party. For many loyal Labour supporters, Starmer's policies feel like a blatant betrayal. Under his leadership, the party was supposed to offer a distinct alternative, a sharp contrast to the Conservative Party's harsh cuts, bringing hope for a fairer and more equal society. Instead, the public is witnessing a series of increasingly severe economic policies, leading to growing disappointment and anger within communities. These criticisms have severely damaged Starmer's image as a leader of the working class. For someone who once promised to fight for those suffering under the Conservative Party's austerity measures, his willingness to maintain these policies has left many stunned and disillusioned.